development consultant and minister. As a private practice therapist, she's worked with cancer patients and their families for 19 years, bringing guided imagery, energy-based therapies, and body work to address emotional pain and healing. Along the way, she also taught interactive guided imagery as an organizational consultant. She is licensed in sacred theology and ordination in the Independent Catholic Church and took Beatitudes training from Douglas Kloss. I met Roxanne when we both attended UCS and where she received her Doctor of Ministry degree in 2005. Her dissertation, which I was privileged to be a committee member of, was this: Reinventing the Rite of Ordination in Service to the Creation Spirituality Community. I was incredibly impressed with both her extensive scholarship and her wisdom in that work. Currently, Roxanne teaches classes and leads retreats in creation spirituality, Aramaic understanding of Jesus' message, Mary Magdalene, and spiritual development. Roxanne also joined the Creation Spirituality Community's board in 2017. Just one more thing. There's a theme running through Roxanne's multifaceted career. She explained to me, my sacred work in the world has to do with synthesis and peacemaking. I am called to hold divergent views and expand my frame of reference to a container large enough to hold them in some form of unity. It pushes me to look deeply into places where the fabric of unity seems torn or ragged in my life, in the communities that I am part of, and in our political discourse. Looking deeply at the gifts and challenges of our species, I strive to hold the work of spiritual development and ecological advocacy in a unified package. A beautiful statement. So, as you will discover, Roxanne is a very creative theological thinker and a fascinating storyteller. So, welcome, Roxanne.
Thank you, John.
We're so glad to have you. Is there anything you want to add to your introduction before we get started?
No, that's plenty.
Well, you've had a very diverse career. We could talk about you for hours. Well, tell us about that picture in the background, though. I've seen it for the first time. It's a beautiful picture. What's the story behind it?
The title of the picture is The Guardians. And the one on this side, see, is holding a bird. The one next to her is holding a fish. The one next to her is holding a tree. And the one next to her is holding a child. And so they're the guardians of creation. You know, they're the elements and aspects of creation. They're the guardians of it. And so this picture was given to me by a friend. And I just thought it really needed a prominent place in my home to remind me that there are guardians, and that we're the guardians. That one of the things I love about the picture is the guardians have no faces, and so our faces, they're our faces. You know, we're different times, different days. We're holding that energy of guardian.
Oh, that's beautiful. You were also telling us before we began about your lei around your neck.
Yes,
So beautiful.
Speaking to you from Hawaii, and as some of you know, in Hawaii, when you're given a lei, the tradition is actually that when you want to give someone a lei, what you do is you make it or create it, and then you wear it so that it's infused with your breath, with your mana, with your love, with your aloha, so that then when you give it to that person, what you're really giving them is that symbol of love and aloha. And this particular lei is it's a yarn. It's made with yarn knotted into little flowers. So this is one that I really treasure. So that's one I chose to wear for today.
Thank you for wearing it. It's beautiful. Yeah. Wow. Okay, well, so a few weeks ago when we were talking about your interview, you said something very interesting to me. You linked the 4 paths of creation spirituality to the universe story and reframed it as the 4 invitations. I found that so fascinating. Can you tell us more about that integration?
Sure. And it happened, the transformation in my thinking happened over, a period of a couple years. So if we start, the universe is a 13.7 billion year old love story. And that attraction is the force that holds the universe together. So that love and attraction are integral to the universe. Somewhere along the line, the human being began to think of itself as separate from all the rest of creation. And there's a lot of different stories about how that happened. Whether you believe that it is the cognitive revolution or eating fruit that wasn't quite ripe yet from a tree. Well, however you want to, whatever story helps you understand this experience, that the situation is that the human has the capacity to think and imagine themselves as separate. So what I believe is that the Creator, oftentimes I use the word sacred unity as like a name, interchangeable with Creator. So the Creator is longing for us to reconnect, or to know that remember that we're connected. And we seem to do better when we feel connected to something bigger than ourselves. So the notion that sacred unity is always reaching toward us, with much more strength and love than we even know how. All of our efforts at meditation and self-improvement, they're sort of a drop in the bucket to the emphasis or the energy that sacred unity is pouring toward us to feel reconnected. So as I started thinking about so what I realized is that for myself, that it's become a little bit more meaningful, or it's evolved from sort of 4 paths that we journey on to having a sense that there's 4 invitations, that the Holy One is always giving us, sending us, invitations. If you remember in the first Harry Potter movie, the invitation to Hogwarts, the house is just filled with these invitations. They come down the chimney and the door. The Holy Spirit is constantly, just like that, sending us these invitations. Now, there's 4 different flavors of invitation. So the first invitation comes in this beautiful envelope of blue and green. And that's the invitation that says, come closer to me through your ability to experience awe, wonder, and gratitude, and beauty. So the first invitation is pretty easy to receive and want to open. But it's all an invitation to remember our closeness, to remember our connection. So there are different, different kinds of beauty, different things that inspire awe. And it can be whatever, because what comes with that is this feeling of connection. Now, the second kind of invitation that we're always getting, this one comes wrapped in a plain brown wrapper. So it's not really as exciting an invitation as the other invitation. And it's the invitation into the unknown. It's the invitation into mystery. It's the invitation into disruption of what we think of as our life and what we define as loss, separation, darkness, sadness. It's that deep dive, that inner swing. And this too is an invitation to be closer, because it's really during the times of loss, the times when, all of our deck of cards is blown up in our face, and we have to restart calibrating who we are, what we stand for, what gives us meaning, that we get that chance to feel closer by taking the deep dive. So it's a really hard envelope to want to open, but it has a lot of really rich fruit in it. The third invitation comes in rainbow paisley colored envelope. It's alive. And that's the invitation to experience connection through creativity. In other words, it's the invitation to replicate the Creator, to express forth in the same way, to pour forth in the same way the Creator does, this vital life energy, this wahala, through creativity. So, you know, everyone who's ever created anything at some point describes, you know, losing themselves in creating.
Mm-hmm.
And that's that magic moment where we are closer to the Creator through creating. So that invitation is pretty amazing. You know, the colors on the invitation often are engaging, and we want to go toward that invitation. And then the last invitation is the invitation about transforming. And that invitation, when you pick it up, it's really interesting, because when you pick it up, it looks one way, and when you open it, it's transformed itself into something else. So it's like the surprise invitation. It's the thing that you never can know or guess what kind of invitation it is, because it's always transforming. And so
that.
Go ahead.
An example of that.
Let's see. And well, the first transformation, of course, is your inner transformation. The ability to, you know, identify when you have the chance, if you have the chance to, quote unquote, retire from one profession and see what life has in store for you, you know, next. That you may have spent your life thinking of yourself as a psychotherapist or a psychologist or a teacher. And all of a sudden, you know, one day it's like you could say you were that, but you're not doing that anymore. So that's that inner transformation. I think that being part of outer transformation, for me, the most incredible experience of that was actually working for marriage equality. That, you know, 25 years ago, no one ever thought, let alone dreamed, that would be part of our society. And yet here we are, you know, and I was part of it. I stood up for it. I talked about it. I witnessed to it. You know, so, and it was all these little steps that were part of, and I felt closer to my Creator. I felt closer to sacred unity because I was part of something bigger. I was part of the development of, I was part of the flowering of, I was part of the unfolding, you know, the deconstructing and reconstructing a new paradigm for our culture. So the thing that all of these have in common, you know, the purpose of all of them is to remind us to be closer, to remind us of the love that's continually pouring toward us. And all we need to do is open up. And so we get these invitations, you know, every day, probably every minute in certain circumstances, to feel invited. So I tend to not think of them very much as paths, but I think of them as invitations into the divine conversation or the divine relationship.
I love that. It's very enlivening. I mean, it brings you to life when you think of it as an active interaction rather than a path. Yeah, I like that a lot. Yeah. Wow. So you also talked about a class that you were working on called Blessing of Creation that you developed from an idea from Matt Henry. But I understand that you'll be teaching it at the Kala Upapa National Historical Site on the island of Molokai. Can you tell us about its pedagogy, content, and its unique audience? I mean, what have you created here? What's going to happen?
Yeah. So Kalapapa, for those of you that don't know, it was what was referred to as the leper colony. And in the late 1800s, people were ripped, torn from their families, and with very little notice, put on a boat from Honolulu mostly, but from all of the islands, and shipped not only to one of the remotest islands in the Hawaiian Islands, but to a peninsula. So on three sides is the raging, biggest, deepest, widest ocean. And on one side is several 1,000-foot cliff. So it is truly isolation. And they were sent there with very meager supplies. Oftentimes, the boats that would bring these people would push them off, and the ones who survived had to swim to the shore, and that it was kind of a no person's land. Not much order or law or civility was present in the very early days of Kalaupapa. And then many of you have heard about Father Damien and Mother Marianne, who were Roman Catholic missionaries, and they both began to work. They've been granted sainthood by the Roman Catholic Church for their work in Molokai. Hansen's disease, which is the disease that the common name is leprosy, which is spoken about a lot in the Bible as well, was cured in the early 60s. There was they understood the disease and people were cured. So then the people in the settlement actually had an option to leave. But most of them, you know, this was their family. This was their community. They'd lived there for 30, 40, 50 years. And they wanted to stay. And now it's a National Historic Park. So every year, a colleague of mine leads a spring spiritual retreat to Kalaupapa. And we go, it has two purposes, which totally fit with creation spirituality, in that in the morning, we're doing service projects to help the community. And then in the afternoon, we're doing a retreat. So it's structured that way because it's hot in the afternoon. So we work out, you know, we work or paint or cook or, you know, do things to benefit the community in the morning. And so Phyllis is giving me an opportunity this year to lead some of the spiritual part of the retreat and to bring in the creation spirituality principles. So I'm really excited to do that. The course that I developed, actually, as I was, you know, influenced by our work at creation spirituality at the university, one of the things that really moved me during that time was the pedagogy that we experienced there in terms of body prayer, lecture, art as meditation, and then processing, debriefing. And so I was really trying to figure out how could I, on a local level, on a very small scale, bring that pedagogy into a local community. And I teach at Episcopal Church in Vancouver courses there. And so I'm really very grateful that I was able to work out a way that I think I was able to kind of marry these concepts. So the class starts with a body prayer. And then there's a lecture that's an introduction to certain creation spirituality content. And Matt Henry, our colleague in school, he had put together this idea that there's one blessing, 2 affirmations, 3 avocations, and 4 paths. And I just extended on that to talk about 5 elements, 6 essentials, which is a creation spirituality communities tool, and 7 directions. And so what we do is that after the lecture, then people have what I call their own work. So they go home after the evening presentation, and over the course of the next week, they do a very specific task of artist meditation. So it's writing a simple poem, or looking for pictures that remind them of something. There's something that is fairly easy to do that people can have around their house, to craft a salutation, maybe the way that they would address the divine as they start each day. So so then the second week and every following week, when people come back, the first half of the class is really people sharing their artist med with each other. So we get a chance to benefit and just have this rich sharing. And then we go on to the next topic. So I kind of mix them up. I usually start with 3 avocations because I think that's an interesting place to start for people to start thinking about their work, the mystic, the artist, and the prophet or the warrior. So I'm just so pleased at how well it came together. And then I'm going to have a chance to use some of this over in Kalapapa at the former leper colony. It's the weekend after Easter. So it's going to be a pretty exciting time to do that. So
that is exciting. It sounds like an experientially based introductory course on creation spirituality.
Yeah.
Would it make sense to make that into like an online course of some sort?
I would like to. I've talked to the board about perhaps pilot testing something like that. And I really think it could work well as an online course. Again, because people would have a chance in the intervening week to do their artist meditation and then share it. And, Zoom is a perfect kind of platform because, people can hold up things and talk about what they did or read a poem or whatever. So it really forms a circle, a community where people can see each other and look at their creations and reflect together.
That's very rich, and it's also very inviting. I mean, like people who may have want to put a toe in the water or want to just learn a little bit more about creation spirituality, have a chance to walk through these classes and come out with a much deeper understanding. I like that.
Yeah, and to really make it theirs. They get to try on a bunch of different things. Maybe the avocations don't fit them, but the idea of 5 elements really turns them on and they start thinking about that in their life. So there's lots of openings for people to find something about creation spirituality that they might resonate with.
Just like the modules.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's lovely. Let's go a little deeper. Can you say something about your growing up years? I mean, you told me that you were a mystic from the beginning, sitting under a lilac bush.
Yes.
Can you tell us that story?
Yes. When I was 5 years old, so I came from a family that moved all the time. So that's one of I had the vagabond life. And so when we moved to Chicago, when I was 5 or 6, outside my room grew this very big old lilac bush, which I loved. So I made a little fort inside this lilac bush, and I just loved it there. I would go and sit there, and I think I probably was in kindergarten when this happened, because I remember. So I was sitting there looking up, and I saw the leaves, and I noticed that they were heart-shaped. And as a 5-year-old, I thought they were all Valentines. Anything that's heart-shaped was a Valentine at that stage of my development. So I said, "Oh, look it! This is a whole tree of Valentines." And I really felt, God reach out and put his hand on my shoulder and say, "And they're all Valentines for you. They're all Valentines about my love for you." Which was amazing, as a child. And, you never appreciate how early experiences are going to come out in later life. So as you can tell by the background, purple's always been my favorite color, right?
Looks like it.
And when I was a kid, purple was a mourning color. So my mother had to make my clothes because I only wanted purple clothes. And so I had my first house that I was decorating all by myself. I could do anything that I wanted to do. So I was very practical in every room but my bedroom. And I wanted to have violet mini blinds, purple shades in my room. And the interior decorator that was helping me was, "Oh, no, you don't want that. No, when you change the color, we just over and over again, no, you really don't want that." And finally I said, "Well, I want it so much that if you won't order it for me, I'll find someone who will." So she ordered these blinds for me, and they came and hung them up. And so the first morning that I woke up in my room after these blinds were installed. I was just laying in my bed and seeing the sun, and my room was on a second story, and it looked out all on trees, so it was like a tree house. And I opened my eyes and I realized that what I had recreated was the same thing of looking up through the lilac bush when it was in bloom.
Oh.
That the purple shades and the green trees were exactly that. It looked just like that. And I hadn't thought of that bush, you know, in decades. But at that first morning when I opened my eyes, it's like, oh my gosh, this is that. I love that. So
how did it feel, and how does it still feel when you're around lilac colors and purple colors? What does it do to you?
It just feels like that same, these are all Valentines, you know, these are all experiences of love. These are love that the universe has, you know, is pouring toward us all the time.
You've had so many interesting experiences in your life, spontaneous happenings that may have started off as just wanderings or you know, like a tourist activity, and suddenly they become so much more. You were talking about one in Italy that happened when you were living there for 4 years, and you broke off from a group of people, and
actually this particular thing happened in Switzerland. I lived in Italy, but I was in
Geneva. I messed that one up. Okay.
Right. And it was, Geneva is a great city because there's many Reformation churches and there's many Roman Catholic churches. So, and I love to visit churches. So I planned a whole day. The group was elsewhere and I had the day to myself. So I got the map and I kind of made out a route to go and visit 7 or 8 different churches. And so I'm sitting in the first church. It's a Reformation church. And as I am quite uncharacteristic, I feel this sense of like a presence with me. And what I start hearing is this woman who's a illiterate peasant telling me about the gains and the losses of the Reformation. Right? So I don't know quite what to think about this. I'm just willing to sit there and listen. You know, and what she's pouring out to me was that in this church, she couldn't read. So what was gone with the Reformation was all of the pictures, all of the imagery. And that's how she knew the stories. The stories were in the stained glass windows and in the artwork in the church. And so for her, the loss of the Reformation was about the way she could know the stories. But the gain for her of the Reformation was about that she could have a direct relationship with the Holy One herself. She didn't need any intermediary to mitigate that relationship. So it was the sense of gains and losses. So I'm kind of sitting there trying to take this all in. It's emotional to hear this. I mean, it's very poignant. And so it finally kind of subsides. And so then I go to the next church and I sit down and she's still there. She's there with me again. And she's telling me about more things that have gone on. And, you know, so it was like what it was like to live during the Reformation as a real person in this city, which is has a profound history. The Reformation, you know, persecution. I mean, it's just very difficult. So all this day, she was with me, just telling me these experiences, different nuances, what was gained, what was lost, how it affected her connection with God. So the very last, this very last church on my itinerary, it's the afternoon, and this is a church. This is a Roman church that has beautiful pink marble. You know, it's like the whole thing is this gorgeous pink marble. So it feels like a very heart kind of place. It's a beautiful church with very lovely imagery and very soft nuance. And the light, of course, is streaming in the afternoon sun. It's just streaming in the windows. So it makes it a very radiant place. And what I heard was, now that you have experienced the split, heal it. And that was it.
Wow.
So
wow.
for the next, 15 years, I was working to understand what that meant. And it's grown, more and more and more from there. But it was really it was a very kinesthetic, it was, I felt like I was given information in a deeper than into, it was totally different than reading a book about the Reformation. It was really in this person's heart. It was in their, and the sense of anguish about trying to find your way and keep the gains and be open to the Spirit and follow the path of Jesus. All of those things this person was really struggling to find their way. And, I have no way of explaining what happened to me, and I just don't even try.
Yeah.
But it was a profound education in a day.
Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds like it speaks to your theme of the ragged and torn unity of life and the fabric of life. And you talk as a mystic about the sacred being at the center of me. I have a sense that has to do with what we're talking about here, when it feels whole and connected and deep and unified, and when it feels torn and stretched and wounded. How does that feel to you? How does that work? What does that phrase really mean? The sacred being at the center of me in this torn time.
I think that what it means for me is that, that sense of a deep river of spirit runs through all of us. And that's the center of us. That's the most profound part of us. And then depending on your creation story, whatever way you explain to yourself that we also have this other experience of not being that, of being alone, isolated, separated on our own, mucking up the environment, mucking up everything else. Our species, it's like we don't have a great track record. So I really love the book, Sapiens. I recommend it to you.
Oh, I've been hearing about that book. Yeah.
It's difficult to read because it's not a great endorsement on our species, but it's a wonderful book. And I incorporated many things from it when I talk about creation spirituality. So I would recommend it to you. But the more and more I can spend so in every moment I'm choosing, am I going to remember about this bigger connection to what's deep inside of me? Or am I going to pay my bills, brush my teeth, clean my house? And, I still do all those things, but when I do them, remembering that I'm connected to something bigger, I do much better.
Yeah. You used a lovely phrase when we were talking. You said the greatest challenge was knowing where and how to make a difference. Sounds like that kind of discernment is really what you're talking about. And how do you know where and how to make a difference? How do you feel called to step up and act?
That, in the 60s and 70s, I would say most of my energy for activism came from anger. That was the fuel that got me up and out and marching and writing and, on and on. So it was quite hot, especially at that age, but it was, had a very short fuse, and it could burn out pretty fast. And so it was certainly one way of participating in social action. But I think that now my sense has changed pretty radically, in that I think that at that time in my life, I was demonstrating against things. I was working against, tendencies. I was working against pollution or smoking or whatever it was. And I think now what I what I realize is that my slower, stronger, longer burning fuse is about love. And so if I'm working against things, and there's so many opportunities now, but if I'm spending my energy working against those things, it almost has to come from that anger. And so the way that I decide is based on, what do I love more? So if we're talking about, the environment, the military is talking again about increasing sonar testing here in the islands. And the research is pretty conclusive that it has big impacts on the cetaceans when they're doing this testing. So what I really have to figure out is not, I can be mad at the military or the Navy for doing this, but I really need to hone in to, what do I love more? What is the love, so that I'm drawn into action rather than standing up against something. And if it's something that I have enough love for, it's not a hard decision then to show up and do it, because I'm doing it from love. I'm doing it from compassion. I'm doing it from caring, rather than just being angry about what some part of our species is doing again.
That's a lovely distinction. I appreciate that. That's really lovely.
It's more longevity, and as you age, you really have to, choose things that are sustainable.
Well, while we're on the topic, and since this is an elder interview, how has it touched you? How has it changed or affected you in your life?
It has surprised me that it takes so much effort to maintain the things that you once had without effort. For example, just
your hips and your back,
going up and down stairs. It's like I worked in a building that had 3 flights of stairs, and I was always up and down and never thought about it. And now I have stairs in my house, and the way the house is situated, there's 3 flights of stairs. And so it's like, I have to work harder to keep the ability. And, it's like when I'm sick for a week, I have the flu and I'm in bed, to go down to the bottom of my stairs now and get back up again that first day. It's just amazing how much maintenance I require. If I had to go in for maintenance every 100,000 miles as a 20-year-old, now in my 60s, I have to go, my manual has changed, so I have to go in way more often, and I have to spend way more time.
The oil changed more frequently.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's different. The other thing it's really, it's a challenging part of aging that I'm thinking about, and that is my hair. I'm losing my hair. And more people are calling me sir. And, they'll see, I'll drive through the car wash and the person will call me sir. And so it's a really it's one of those brown invitations, into the mystery of, I've never been mistaken for my gender earlier in my life. But those hormones, did something to make those characteristics more pronounced, and they've gone south for the winter. So I am, the thing that's kind of helped me is that in the Gospel of Thomas, one of the apostles are always talking about, how's the world going to end, and are we going to be in the kingdom, and are we on the preferred seating list, and so on and so forth. And Jesus says, when you've made the inside like the outside, and the top like the bottom, and the upside down like the right side up, and the male like the female, and vice versa, then you'll experience the kingdom of heaven.
It's really modeling toward unity.
Yeah, it is. And it's a kind of a thorny, when it's happening to your hair, it's a little harder to acknowledge. But it's a really interesting thing. It's kind of like, oh, that's what's happening. It's more, I'm getting called Sir more. So maybe that's, maybe it's this great kind of blending, or
yeah.
I don't know.
Transformation from a particular discrete, person to some kind of a more unified wholeness and
Well,
beauty.
and certainly the kids, the kids are holding gender way more loosely now than we did when we were kids, and asking way more questions about, are there only two, and are you stuck with it forever? And I mean, so I think all those things one could see as part of this. Gender is in one of those brown envelopes that we're all as a culture kind of unwrapping and grappling with and trying to lean into and understand.
We're just taking apart so many rigidities these days. It's very rich and also for many people very scary. So let me, one more question. What do you think creation spirituality is all about? When you look back over your time and this deep work you've done, what comes up for you?
Yeah. Well, when I was writing that behemoth dissertation that you were so kind to be my sponsor and read, I really had to write a definition then, and I struggled mightily with it, but I dug it out, and I've been thinking about it. So this is what I said then. I said, creation spirituality is an oasis that lives at the confluence of three rivers of wisdom. The intermingling of these rivers has created this oasis or haven. These three rivers of wisdom are the wisdom of indigenous cultures, the discoveries of postmodern science, and the mystical teachings of the world's religions. And I still kind of like, it stood the test of 15 years. And when I really kind of think about it globally or try to step back from it, I think that still is a good explanation of how I experience it. It's this, the new and old. I love that it's the postmodern science and the mystics and the indigenous culture. I mean, new, it's sifting through to find meaning and truth from new places and old places.
And it is a confluence, isn't it? It's not keeping them discrete. It's like living from the amalgam of all of them as a living quality of your own nature.
Right, and looking for similarities, looking at the ways that, the mystics and the indigenous elders and, the God particle. I mean, it's like, so.
Different frames or different lenses on this mystery.
So it's kind of an exciting way to see connections and synthesizing. I think, one of my gifts is taking, and it comes back from that, now that you've seen the split, heal it. It's that synthesizing disparate pieces of information and trying to coalesce them or make find something unifying about them. And so I think that this definition really has allowed me to see myself as a practitioner of creation spirituality, leaning on these three traditions in a respectful way.
Wonderful. Well, is there anything else before we turn it over to questions that you'd like to say about your life or yourself or your work?
I don't think so. It's been very fun to talk to you and to see familiar faces. Hello, Carolyn. It's nice to see you. Is your lunch good? Good. Okay. No. So any questions?
Eat on this show. You have to realize that.
Good. Oh yeah.
Sometimes you have to mute them because they eat loudly.
I eat during every board meeting because it's my lunchtime. When it's 6 o'clock, it's their dinner time. So I'm so glad she's taking care of herself.
Yes. Gail, I invite you to guide us from here.
Wonderful. I just unmuted everyone. Oh, Joe, you're still, was that by choice? We have Joe, I'm going to, no, she's by choice, unmuted. Okay, and Penny, you're unmuted. I'm going to get you off. Nope, I'm not going to get you off. Okay, well, we have just heard some wonderful things said by Roxanne Whitelight. Thank you, John. That was a wonderful, wonderful interview. And if I can remember, she talked about the guardians, and she talked about the course that she was teaching in Creation Spirituality, about the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 way to remember with a number, with fingers on your hand, and particularly talked about the 4 paths as invitations instead of paths, so that this would be a way to that the organizing part of the universe invites us into a relationship, and is inviting us thousands of times more than we're inviting back with our, I might even say, puny little practices that we try to engage. So that was one thing that she gave to us. And then also her work in the
Gail, can I say one thing about that?
To unity. Yeah, sure. Please.
When I learned about the paths, and as I was thinking of them as paths, the thing that was missing was that unifying concept of love that is behind all of them. So I think that's what drew me into a different paradigm, was really, what's the the purpose. When I was talking about them as paths, the overreaching purpose wasn't coming through for me. So when I started thinking of them as invitations, what that really did was allow this overreaching purpose of love to come through.
And you said the universe is a love story. I love that. The universe story is a love story. That's just beautiful. And then, of course, you had a wonderful experience with your... What? Well, Peter, do you have something?
That could be the title of her next book.
That's true. That could be. So I tried to give that little summary to jog our memories and our thoughts, but do you have some questions for Roxanne? Anybody here? Marianne.
Roxanne, I've had this question ever since I met you. And that's, what's the story about your last name, Whitelight?
Oh.
Yeah, so thank you, Marianne. In 1983, I was having the major undoing. So I was just about to turn 30, and I was going through a divorce, and kind of all the things that I thought were the fabric of my life were kind of shredding. And I was starting all over again, and I knew that, actually I was 28, I knew that my life was going to be radically different, and I didn't know how. And so I went on a vision quest, and I, of course, just like me, I had a list of 50 things I wanted to get settled. Trying to being organized and efficient, I wanted to get all these things settled on this one vision quest. But on the list was something about my name. So my maiden name was Walters, and my married name was White. And I didn't really want to stay with either of those. I didn't know what would happen to my name. So that was one of the priorities going into that vision quest. And really, the only one of the list that I was asking about that came through. A bunch of other things came through. None of the things that were on my list. But so I was out in the desert by the Salton Sea, which is in California, to the east of Los Angeles. And so my practice would be to wake up really early and take a long walk in the desert, and then come back to my little encampment and just try and write about, my experience, cry a lot, rail a lot, experience, review my life a lot. And so as the sun was setting one evening, what I heard was that when Walters was your last name, your family of origin were the most important relationships in your life.
Ah.
And when White was your last name, your relationship with your husband was the most important relationship in your life. And for the rest of your life, your relationship with the light will be the most important relationship. So your name will be Roxanne Walters Whitelight. And we're giving you this name because you are extremely forgetful. So lest you think this is anything elevated, we are giving you this name as a remedial education, so that every time you write your name, you will have this immediacy of remembering why you're here and what's your most important relationship. So that was, so, you know, I tried for a little while to kind of step out of that name. And, you know, it was one of those things where it just wasn't going away. And so finally, when my divorce paperwork came through, that's, you know, you have an option then to change your name. So, and that was in 1981. So it's still reminding me every day and every time I sign my name, why I'm here and what's important.
Thank you. Wow.
Yeah. So
wow,
that's
what a story.
That's how it came to be. Remedial education.
Cute. So Peter, you had some background noise on yours, so I put you on mute. Just raise your hand so I can see it if you want to ask a question. Okay? I don't want you to be cut off. All right, good. Anyone else have a question? All right, Marianne, go for it, please.
Why Hawaii?
So the Hawaii is such a sacred land, and it's the indigenous people here are so filled with love that, you know, aloha is love. And that's, you know, it's written into their laws that we would live with aloha, with love. And it's one of in the 70s with the Hawaiian revival, with the hokulea, which is the voyaging canoe, where the Hawaiians began to reclaim their sense of having been a sovereign nation, and also grieve about the incredible loss and injustice that happened to them. It's a culture that both has indigenous wisdom, and it invites you to be part of it. I mean, the Hawaiians that I know are very generous in sharing their wisdom. And they share it in their songs, they share it in hula, they share it in nature. You know, it pervades the climate. It's a constant invitation to remember love. So that's one wonderful thing about it. The other thing is I'm really not a snow person. And, you know, the best sermon of my life was about the snowblower that I own, but I hope I never use. So that's I'm not so much a winter person. So because, you know, I love to be outside. I mean, you know, the thing about talking about the 4 paths as 4 invitations is that awe and wonder, you know, my work every day is to be outside and fill my cells with so much awe and wonder that whatever happens on the news or whatever happens in my world or whatever happens to people I love, it's like the awe and wonder is my fuel. It's my resilience. It's my strength. It's what fills me up so that when the brown invitation comes to my doorstep, I have the resilience and the beauty and the awe and the power to face it and say, okay, what is in this mystery? Mm-hmm. So being able to be outside year around and the immediacy of the ocean, and the awe and wonder, I think that, you know, those are the things that I just really, really cherish. The culture and I get to take a walk by the beach every day. I mean, right at the ocean, and that's pretty cool.
Thank you. Good question. Anyone else have a question for Roxanne? So Roxanne, I have a question.
Okay.
Beyond the joys of the aging body, what would be your attitude about aging for the rest of yourself? And how do you articulate and understand the arc of life from this point of view?
It's a really interesting question, Gail, especially because I'm a person who hasn't birthed any physical or adopted children in the world. Mm-hmm. So my progeny are the classes that I've written, the things that I've shared, the teachings that I offer. Mm-hmm. Those are really my children. And so when I think about kind of the arc of aging and what I'm leaving behind, and I really hope to be able to keep birthing more children, keep birthing more ideas. In my advanced age, I'll be like Sarah and Abraham in the Bible, to keep birthing new ways of thinking about concepts, especially of creation, spirituality, and presenting them in ways that are accessible to people of different eras and different generations. So in terms of the arc of life, I think that the blessing of aging is making time. At first I kind of said yes to too many activities, and I didn't give myself really enough discernment, enough time to think about, as John asked me, what for activism, what do I really love more? And how can I spend my time and energy and attention on what I love more? And it takes time. It takes me time to kind of discern what am I loving more? For the conference last year, I really wanted to, the workshop that I offered was on mending the heart of Abraham. And that was something that I hadn't taught before. It was something that I had been working with myself for a couple of years in terms of Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, and saying, okay, what are the common practices? What are common things to the three religions of the book? What are common elements that I could develop a ritual or an experience around? So that was a really exciting thing for me to toy with those ideas and look for linkages and go deeper into readings about each of them. And so I hope that as the arc of my life continues, that I'll just have more insights into things like that. I'll be a little more fearless to offer things that are sort of obscure and just say, this is of interest to me. This is what would the world be like if one day people of those three religions practiced this 10 to 15 minute ceremony and thought about their cousins in Abraham's family? The world could be profoundly different. And I guess at my age, I've seen so many things change, that in the course of my lifetime, who knows where they might go. And whatever little things I could offer that would help that, it's exciting for me to do that.
What you say about the blessing of aging, because there are blessings, besides the creaks and the slowness. And also there's so many things by our age that we bring to any kind of like class that you're putting together. Your experiences are so broad, and we keep on collecting more and more. And so it takes us longer because we have more to synthesize, but it's also a more profound synthesis, I think. I would think. I know yours are, so.
I have a question.
Oh, good.
I'd like to know what you've learned about the healing process at this stage of your life.
Thank you, Penny. That's a great question. So for me, and this is a good example of synthesis. So one of the classes that I took at UCS was a class by Neil Douglas Klotz on the Aramaic Beatitudes. And so John and I think Marianne too, were in there chanting away and in this class. And I went to this class at an incredible low point in my life. My mother had just died a few months before. I was almost in a near fatal car accident on Christmas Day. My house, the pipes froze and had a flood and wrecked half my house. And then we had to move out, and then it was burglarized. So it's like a quadruple bypass there. So it was 4 brown envelopes stuck together. And so I go, but I've already registered for this class, so I'm going. And in the middle of that class, I kind of woke up and said, oh my gosh, this is a healing methodology. This is a method of healing embedded in these Beatitudes. So they start with, tuning. The first one is about tuning into yourself, connecting with yourself, experiencing what's going on. The second Beatitude is about comforting. The traditional translations about comforting those who mourn. So really the second step in healing is really grieving. And sometimes I would take a huge piece of butcher paper and put it up on the wall, and I would fill it with words about all the changes that came out of my mother's death or some other loss. So it's doing a really good job grieving. Then the third Beatitude, especially when you interpret it in Aramaic, talks about softening what has become too rigid within us. It's about softening that which has become too rigid. So that is a long introspective process and self-inventory about, okay, what are the places that have become too rigid inside of me? And you might think of those as places that are, they built a little fortress to healing, to keep healing out, right? So where are the fortresses? Where are the walls? Where are the moats? The swamps that need to be drained and the walls that need to be dissolved, that are keeping me from experiencing my full healing. So those were the first 3 Beatitudes are all about this very inner work. Then the next one is about, hungering and thirsting for righteousness. It's really about gathering together first the inner community, all the selves, all the parts of the self that need to come to the table together, that we need to set a big enough table to include the disenfranchised parts of ourselves, the parts of ourselves that we're embarrassed about, the parts of ourselves that are totally inappropriate, or whatever, that are angry. Or how can we set a big enough table to let those parts of ourselves come and be seen, be known, be present? The next Beatitude then is all about, and in Aramaic it's from your inner, it talks about the heart, but it's about your inner womb. So going to the inner womb and birthing mercy. So it's those, blessed are the merciful, for they shall see God. So it's going to this inner place and birthing mercy. So if you think about all the parts of yourself that are sitting around this banquet table, taking each other's food, having food fights, whatever they're doing. And you're birthing mercy from inside of you, this river of mercy, just to cover all these people at the table, all these parts of yourself that have been homeless or disenfranchised or not welcomed. So it's about, that step is really about birthing this incredible mercy. And the last one is really about hollowing yourself out. So you've kind of gone through this healing process of breathing and connecting to yourself, grieving the good grief, softening what's too rigid inside of you, inviting in this community and showering this inner community with mercy and love and tenderness. And then the last step is kind of like letting go of it all, of hollowing yourself out like a bone of a bird, so that love and compassion can flow through you. So in that class, it was like this template that I saw embedded in the Beatitudes was all about a really simple, straightforward process people can do, with help of someone, to look at what's stuck in your life, what's really hurting in your life, where do you need healing in your life, and to really go through these steps and just take time with them and notice the ways that you're transformed and healed in that process. I know that was a long answer, sorry.
Oh, it was wonderful. Thank you.
I just felt like I went to the class. I'm so grateful.
It was really
good. I'm giving the rest of the meeting to Penny and John. I have someplace I have to kind of go to earlier than I thought. Thank you all, and please enjoy. I'm going to take everybody off mute, so have your way with it.
And Gail, just out of curiosity, the recording end of it?
Yeah, I think when I come back, I'm going to find out if I've been recording it all this time or not.
So let's put a commercial in before you go, Gail, about contributing to Creation Spirituality Communities, because that's made this possible. Creation Spirituality Communities, if you're not a member, please look on the website and consider being a member, because that's what allows elder interviews and all of the other programs that we offer to happen. So please consider donating or joining to Creation Spirituality Communities.
Go right on our website, because we pay for Zoom, we pay for the mechanism that sends you the information about Zoom, and there's a lot of other pieces too, and we'd appreciate your support. All right.
Thanks.
So, Gail, as you go, take our good birthday wishes with you. Everybody, it was Gail's birthday.
Oh, thank you.
Monday, so send her with loving wishes.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So as we segue, have new questions come up, or comments or reflections on anything that's been said earlier?
Well, I'm just amazed that the thing that hasn't aged in her is her intellect.
Yeah.
It seems timeless, and that you have so much to contribute all the time. I know I was blessed with the whole ordination process, that I was always learning from her.
That's the way I feel too, yeah.
Nice.
So how did this move you? I mean, what were the comments that stirred you most that Roxanne shared following up? Anything?
I'm really hearing the word love a lot, and I think that seems to be a beacon for you, Roxanne. I'm inspired by that.
I think the issue of the path being invitations will really stick with me, because it can get rather cold and box-like, or just sort of like an organizational tool, rather than understanding that it's an invitation to grow deeper in any path or any way that you want to go.
Roxanne, have you written this any place? So that we could have people can have access to this?
Just in my class, just in my classes, just in my class notes. So I haven't yet done that.
We'll write a blog and so we can put it on the website.
Okay.
Or the CSC newsletter.
Or the newsletter, yeah.
You know, the metaphor of the brown envelope is pretty catching.
Yeah. It fits my life.
Well, good. I think we got something from Seth this week about, the next newsletter is coming out. So I'll see if not this newsletter, maybe the next.
Good. It'll touch a lot of people.
Is it going to come in a brown envelope?
Right on.
Hi, Sue. How are you?
I'm good.
It's nice to see your face.
It's good to see you, and I especially love hearing you and feeling your heart in all that you say. That I just turned 80, and life is just so different. It's slowing down. I have an opportunity to teach classes at the Presbyterian Church, and I keep saying no to that because I keep getting this message that I really don't know anything. It's like at my age, I felt that way when I left the halls of UCS. I walked out of there knowing the thing that I learned most is I don't really know anything. But it's like, how would you comment on maybe the wisdom or the intelligence that may be running through me that says, you're done, you don't have to do this anymore. But my heart says, but I want to. So a couple things come to mind. So in general, my first response is, that's the inner critic. That's like, so it's really important to listen to your inner conversation. Because if your inner conversation says, I don't need to do that anymore, then that's one thing. I say that about being a therapist. I was so fortunate to have that profession. I learned so much from my clients, and I don't need to do that anymore. I'm done with that in that sense. So try and listen and tell the difference is if you're saying, I don't need to do that anymore, versus if what's coming through is, I don't know anything, I can't do that. There's some background noise. Somebody has background noise. But because what's true, Sue, is that you know more than any people of that Presbyterian church about creation spirituality. And if they're inviting you to come and teach a class, it is an incredible opportunity for you to explore some ideas with them and let them teach you what, their vision of it as you explain the basic concepts to them. So it's a wonderful it's the Paisley multicolored envelope of creativity that's being offered on your doorstep. And I know you'll know what to do. And if you need help, you can ask people to help you do it. But, I know that you know Linda and, you know people who can help you. Mm-hmm. So really try and discern if you're saying, I've done that and I don't need to do that anymore. Or if you're saying, or if what's going on is the inner critic that's saying.
So I want to say that I really identify with what you're saying, that there may be a third option, which has to do with the freedom and relief of not having to know anything, which allows you to be wide open to everything and without lenses between you and it of knowledge. You're just, you're in the awe and wonder when you don't have to know things. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, and how do you go teach that? Because it's so beyond words.
And so what?
Beyond words, that.
Yes, right. You're living in a different state of consciousness when you don't have to know stuff.
Exactly. But I have to say, Roxanne, I don't think that I learned any more about creation spirituality until I finally got a copy of your dissertation. I mean, it's just right there. And thank you so much for that.
Thank you for reading it. It was a labor of love to write it, and anyone who's read it, it's a labor of love to read it.
It's a great child that you had there. One of your best children.
Most prolific and most left-brain children.
Oh, well, out of curiosity, what was the topic?
The topic was reinventing the rite of ordination. But what I felt I had to do, Penny, was I had to define what creation spirituality was. Then I had to say, is creation spirituality objectively a sacred tradition or not? So that was another couple hundred pages. Like, what is it? And then does it qualify as a bona fide sacred tradition? And there's 7 criteria. And so I had to go through all those criteria. Then another 100 pages was about, does it need organized leadership? And if so, what roles of organized leaders does it need? And what roles are totally inappropriate for it? And then, is there a way to train these leaders to do this for their sacred world? So it was a behemoth. Mel told me it was like 2 dissertations.
But it was really an incredible piece of work. It's just sort of like you were inventing a whole new religion here, basically, and how to. I was very impressed. What did something become of? I mean, I know you were presenting that to the board at some point around having an ordination track. Did you want to say something about that?
Yeah, I feel really blessed. I don't know why there's background noise.
Yeah.
Can everybody put themselves on mute just for a second? Okay. Maybe it's me. How's that? Is that any better? Okay. I feel really pleased actually when all the birth giving was done and the mess was cleaned up, that I was able to develop the first ordination program in creation spirituality. I feel like that was a big thing, and I felt really blessed. That was not the dissertation I had in mind. I don't know, John, you probably remember this. I was going to write a totally different dissertation, and I went to this luncheon meeting. Marianne, I know you were with me during these times. I went to this luncheon meeting that the school was trying to explore, do we want to have an ordination program? And I was sitting there, and what I heard was, this is your work. And I said, no, it's not. I'm writing about something else. I have this other dissertation in mind. No, this is your work. And it was like, well, I really don't want to do this. This is big, I'm not really interested in this. And so it was a bit of a struggle. So to live into it being my work. And then, of course, all these 500 pages later, it was obviously I had something to say. So it was in there. It was part of my work. But I was very disappointed after the first class was ordained that the school, it was in a very different state, and the program really couldn't continue. So that was, and then kind of when in 2006, when ordination, or in 2016, when another ordination class started and another curriculum was developed, I was glad to see something different come forward, and then there wasn't much energy for it again after that. So I don't know. I'm really curious to the Holy One if this is like a 10-year phenomenon. Every 10 years something happens, or how exactly does this program work? But my thinking has shifted in that on the board we did a survey, and in that survey what people really said they wanted from us is the ability to connect with other like-minded people. So originally we were training people for their sacred work in the world, and the ordaining body was the school. And so it was about all the different ways creation and spirituality was expressed through different people. And my thinking has changed such that if creation and spirituality communities is going to do something else with leadership development, that really what we need to do is we need to form a group and teach how to call a creation spirituality circle. What is the mechanism and methodology for, where is the cookbook to say, you send out to this many websites, or, and this is, I know what to do when you get the group there. I can help teach people that. But there's a whole set of new methodologies about how to get a group together now. And as Carol and I experienced this week, we're not the most savvy on our web prowess. And so we need people who are with different skills. So if every one of you just, on a lark said, I'd like to see if I could get a circle of 10 people to study creation spirituality right where I live and meet once a month or every other week or whatever. It's like, ask yourself, how would you do it? Because the survey said that's what people want. They want ways to connect with what creation spirituality has to offer. And every one of us is in a different location, and every one of us could learn, if we wanted to do something like that. And so what's the methodology by which, it's not rocket scientist, right? It's not rocket science to do this, but there's a lot of steps that a lot of us don't know. And so how can we make it as easy as possible and get some, 20 somethings into, I look at other businesses that have done that. They send out something on the web every 4 days about their business. You have to keep it in front of people. Those are not things I want to do, but I can help people. Once you get people together, I can give you some ideas about how to experience creation spirituality together. So it's going to take a group of people with a lot of different skills, I think, to create this skill set. To be able to actually call circles in local communities and people to partner together wherever you are to make it easy so that if people want to connect with you, they can find you. And it's not too big of a burden. So if you have a day job or, other things going on, that it doesn't become your whole life. You're the convener of a circle. You do specific things around arranging space and getting people to know about it. And then really, as soon as you can, your first circle, start parceling out. Who wants to talk about invitation 1? Who wants it next week? Will you bring a reading about awe and wonder? Next week, could you bring something about creativity? As soon as you can. You don't want this to be your show. You want it to be the group show. So break it down into little pieces that you could ask someone who doesn't profess a lot of knowledge. Could you find something inspirational about transformation, please, and bring it to read at the next circle? Little things, so that everyone is contributing to the stew. Everyone's bringing something to offer, and it's a group experience together.
Oh my gosh. So we are, that's okay. We are just running out of time now. Penny, do you have anything else you want to say, or do you think we are time to wrap up?
Thank you for listening. It's like, Sue, it's so nice to see you again. Peter, I miss working with you. Marianne, I love you dearly from all of our time together. Carolyn, you helped me in more ways than I could mention. Penny, it was so nice to see you this summer. John, John and I used to be the instigators of what we would call a puppy pile at school, where we just kind of all pile on each other at the end of a long day.
It was the ultimate healing experience. It was unity.
Thank you so much for giving me this invitation, Penny and John.
Roxanne, is there a closing from your Hawaiian experiences that would fit here?
Let's see. Oftentimes, Hawaiian oles or chants speak about the way we're enlivened by the Aina, which is the Hawaiian word for land. So just take a moment and wherever you are on the planet, think of your feet and thank them, and then go down deeper. And if you're on a more than one story, go down. I can imagine putting your feet in the soil of your own place where you stand right now. This blessed Aina is a gift from the whole universe. This Aina is a 4.6 billion year old gift to you. A place for you to plant your feet and be a springboard of love. Be a fountain of hope.